a couple things to finish up, and then you're going to work on some labs. So we're going to, since we're talking about all this electrical activity, like we mentioned earlier, the EKG is something that can help us measure or check this electrical firing. This electrocardiogram, anybody ever have one? Okay, they're kind of cool, especially if you know how to read them. Now, I can pretty much guarantee, depending on what area you go into, you might have to do an EKG on somebody. Meaning you need to know like where to place the leads and all that sort of stuff. And all you do is really look at one cycle of the heartbeat. Even though when you get the EKG, they basically put all those little leads on, turn the machine on, and then turn the machine off. And that's it, and then take all the little leads off. You know, it takes more time to put the leads on than it does to get the readout of the EKG. Because the EKG, it's detecting electrical currents in the heart based upon those electrodes they place all over the body. The electrocardiograph, the machine, amplifies the signals that it's picking up and produces the record of the heart's electrical activity. I always learned it as being an EKG, but you do see it listed as an ECG because electrocardio, C for the cardio. What it is doing, it is not only recording the action potential of the nodes, both the SA and the AV, but it's also checking the action potentials of these cardiac cells themselves. It shows, for the most part, 3 principal points, and they are points, okay? So what it's going to show is that when you look at the printout, we have what's called the baseline. So you have just the straight line. The baseline. When a person dies, that's what you get. Because there is no more activity of heart. You get the straight line. When the heart is beating, like I said, it literally shows points. It shows points that go above the line and below the line. And in one heartbeat, one cardiac cycle, in that one cardiac cycle, because you'll have one cycle, one cycle, one cycle, one cycle, in that one cycle, under normal conditions, the lines going up, the points going up, points going down, should be in a certain form. They should have a certain look. They call it PQRST. The letters have no significance. P doesn't stand for anything. That is not like short for any type of term, QRS, anything like that. We have what's called our P wave, QRS complex, the T wave. What they are associated with is some type of activity occurring in that conduction system of the heart. So this electrical conduction system correlates to something on the EKG. In the P wave, that's the signal from my SA node. My pacemaker, what is starting the heartbeat. So it's the signal from my SA node as it spreads across the atria from the right to the left and causes the depolarization. The atrial systole contraction actually begins about 100 milliseconds after the P wave begins. This is what I'm talking about, the things happening in milliseconds. So when it starts, like I said, if it's an average heartbeat of about 70 to 75 beats per minute, it's occurring in less than a second. So in that time frame, it takes 100 milliseconds of it when it starts before the atria even contract. Once that happens, that signal from the SA has to travel to the AV. There's a delay. This is my QRS. This from the AV has to spread, has to go to that bundle of His, go down, travel back up by way of the Purkinje fibers through the ventricular, the ventricle, myocardium, and depolarize them. Once again, a short delay, but while that is happening, look what happens to my atria. So as my ventricles begin to contract, my atria begin to relax. Once my ventricles begin to relax, the atria, that we're going to have just a brief, when I say milliseconds, okay? Brief recovery, and the process is going to start all over again. So when you hook up those leads, you turn on the machine, and you get a heartbeat. Like I said, this is going to be basically one cycle, one cycle, one cycle, one cycle, because they don't keep the machine on long. They basically turn it on, push a button, turn it off. That's what they do. But it gives them several heartbeats. For any of y'all planning to become a doctor? Okay. For your choice. Nursing, probably. No. Physical therapy. Dental. Okay. Huh? I understand that. Now, like I said, for most of you, most likely, you're going to have to do this at some point. Under normal conditions, that is pretty much how a normal EKG is going to look. You are going to have the cycle start, P wave, meaning the SA node fires. You've got that little bit of delay as we go from right atria to the left, and they contract, and then we begin filling of that. We get the AV node, blood is moving, and then ventricle are going to contract. They have to relax, get a little bit of a recovery before we start the process all over again. So under normal conditions, that's what it's going to look like.
So I think, from what I know, like as a nurse, you can get, like as just a normal nurse, you're not really required to know how to read this, but I think that as you can get certain specializations like advanced life support, where if a patient does code, then actually run the defibrillator, and understanding the heart rhythms is going to let you know what shock needs to be administered, or even if shock doesn't need to be administered.
And it's my understanding, like for nursing programs, that the students who come in, they have to have an understanding.
Yeah, an understanding.
Yeah, they've got to have an understanding not only of what a normal EKG looks like. You need to know what is occurring at the steps. Atria, filling, atria contracting, ventricles filling. It's my understanding they expect you to come into the program knowing this.
Even for LPN, I had to have
Yes.
my mom go over from last night.
Yeah, and it's like they have this expectation that you are supposed to know this. So, under normal conditions, yes. But chances are, if you're doing if you're working the emergency room, for example, and you're doing an EKG, well, it might be because somebody has something wrong. And I just couldn't get my stuff to line up right, so that's why the typing over there looks pretty bad, okay? This is trying to show you right here, based upon the red and the green, all right, depolarization, repolarization, and their correlation to the EKG. Do you see how they're trying to represent all of that? Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all right? They're trying to show you at each of these little changes from the baseline. This is your baseline right here. And like I said, they're points. Points either go up or down from the baseline. And they're telling us something. So the very first thing, SA node firing, atria filling, atria have to contract. When atria contract, we're going to need to be filling of our ventricles. We got to have the SA node travel to the AV node, down the bundle of His, up the Purkinje fibers. Ventricles are filling. As ventricles are filling, pressures are changing. That's going to have contraction. So when they contract and the whole process starts all over again, they're wanting you to know this. This is something you're definitely going to have to study. So for your chosen program. So like I said, chances are, usually you're doing the EKG because there's something wrong. So if you did an EKG, and this one right here, this would be my normal rhythm. When something goes wrong with the rhythm of the heart, it's termed an arrhythmia. The most familiar is the one termed ventricular fibrillation, also known as a heart attack or an MI, a myocardial infarction. The EKG shows very weak, chaotic, ventricular depolarization. That electrical signal is traveling very randomly and doesn't die out. When I look at the norm, I get recovery. And that's important. In the case of the heart attack, you don't. The other part that happens, there's no coronary blood flow. So that means somewhere to the tissue of the heart, it is not receiving a blood supply. Hopefully, that defibrillation is